One of the most common questions I received while I was recruiting for my master's thesis was, am I disabled enough to qualify? Because I was studying high-risk disabled individuals. People were constantly going, I have this, am I qualified? I have this, am I qualified? Am I disabled enough? And I see this a lot across social media when disability advocates talk about disability, they talk about disability identity, and all of these comments are asking the disabled advocate to essentially give permission to the person asking that they can identify as disabled, that they can use mobility aids, that they can use wheelchairs or crutches or just anything that would truly benefit them. And it's really fascinating to me because in my form of research in communication studies, as a social science researcher, we are not allowed to ask for diagnosis. We're not allowed to ask for proof. We're not allowed to do anything that's like asking for medical information in general. And we can only include what has been offered to us. And so when I look at the context of what we're studying and then put it in the context of what we're living, it's so different. And one side is because in research, disability is a protected class, but the other side is that our society doesn't really protect disabled individuals or give them the opportunity to identify as disabled. So in this video, I really want to break down 3 main reasons that I think that people with disabilities don't identify as disabled, and really from a perspective of a paradigm shift of we're going to change our worldview. I want you to be comfortable in challenging some of these fundamental ideas that you have about the way our society should work. Because I think that is truly the only way to address disability in the way that it's going to be beneficial for you and everyone around you. So in order to talk about these 3 things, I want you to think about disability in the perspective of story. In our society, we tell ourselves stories every day. We say, this is the bad guy, this is the good guy, this is what makes me a good person, so I am a knight, I'm a king. There's a trend all over TikTok of being like the poet, soldier, and king. Like, we have roles in a story. We're very attracted to stories. And disability has a role in those stories. And a lot of times our society writes disability as the bad guy. Not even just as an antagonist that's like a neutral antagonist that makes life difficult, but truly a maleficent force in our world. And that we have our bad guy, which is our disability. It's our physical experience. And then the lackey, who's just doing what the bad guy wants him to do, is inaccessibility. So if you enter a space and you're a wheelchair user and it's not accessible, well, that's because you're disabled. And that's the problem, is that you're disabled. And so the lackey's just making life more difficult because you're disabled. Rather than the fact, like the truth of it, is that if we took away this fairy tale lens, the bad guy, if we have to assign them, is the power structures that demand that we maintain inaccessible spaces. Because why does a classroom have to be built like that? Why does our environment have to be like that? Why can't we offer online options for people to work? Why can't we offer interpreters? Why can't we offer things to assist people who are visually impaired? Why can't we offer support for neurodivergent individuals? Because so many of those answers comes down to this ownness on the individual, that you are this moral soldier who's in this battle, but you're the only person fighting it, and you're fighting it with your disability, and then his lackey, and we're just hanging out watching, and we're wishing the best for you like you're a local hero. And as long as you're not doing anything to hurt us, you're a local hero, and you're so inspirational. But the moment you say, I am disabled, I'm not good at, not even I'm not good, I'm not equipped to fight this fight, I shouldn't have to fight this fight, you're no longer our good guy, you're no longer our inspirational story, because at that point you turn around and you say, something is wrong here and it is not me. And this is going to be a trend that you see throughout this video, because a lot of it comes down to putting the ownness on the individual versus the community. And to be disabled, you have to, I think, to be kind to yourself, have to acknowledge that disability is both very intimately experienced by the person. I have very real chronic health issues that makes my life more difficult, but so many of the disabling factors in my life is the environment that I live in, and it's in the inaccessibility that is I'm just expected to deal with. And those two factors just are gross. I don't have any other words. But you have to be able to recognize both sides of them in order to address the shame that comes with identifying as disabled. So the second reason I think people don't identify as disabled, at least not publicly, is because they are afraid of being seen as an attention seeker. Going to be completely honest, I struggle with this, is that I am a visibly disabled individual, but I don't want to talk about my disability. I don't want to talk about my diagnosis. I don't want to bring any extra attention to it than it already has. And sometimes my brain interprets that as I don't want anyone to hold my disability against me, and I'm trying to constantly negate other people's stigma and the way that they see me, but also it's reducing my disability to make it comfortable for other people, because there's some very uncomfortable aspects of my life, and people don't need to know my medical history. They don't need to know that information, but there are things that people do that makes my life more difficult. And the moment that you say, hey, the thing that you are doing is making my life more difficult, then that gets turned around, because no longer is your life a story. No longer are you that hero, as we talked about earlier. You now become a burden to society. Or so if you are a burden, you're either a innocent burden or you're attention-seeking burden. And you'll see a lot of times that when someone becomes disabled, the people around them will start flipping between the two stories of, oh, I understand they're having such a hard time and they're dealing with all of this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And the moment that they ask for support, the moment that they ask for change, then it's, you can't expect people to change their life for you. You can't expect, and you see this a lot with masking, a lot of reactions around COVID were this story of like, oh, what you're going through is sad, but I don't need to be doing anything about that. I don't need to, that's a you issue. You can deal with that, and if you talk about your issues, if you talk about your loneliness, if you talk about the inaccessibility, if you talk about being disabled, especially disabled by my own actions, that makes me feel gross, and it doesn't make me feel good, so I'm just going to say I don't want to talk about it, and we can't talk about it anymore. And if you want to continue talking about it, I don't want to be friends anymore. And it's so frustrating, because this is a reality, is that people with disabilities have individuals like that in their lives, and it makes it hard to identify as disabled, because if you are not that person who's experienced it, you know other people who have. And we internalize these things. We internalize the story. We want to fit into the narrative of our society, but the narrative was not built for us. The story, the world, the environment was not built for us. And so in order to forge a way of like saying, hey, the way that the story is going is largely fabricated, we make it up as we go along, why don't we change it a little bit? Why don't we change the perspective? Because honestly, what's the problem with having a hard time and talking about that hard time? Because that is what we do when we try to destigmatize and bring awareness to mental health, bring awareness to different illnesses, bring awareness to different things that make people feel uncomfortable, is we're saying, hey, this is an issue and it needs attention. So yes, I am attention seeking in this moment because I need that attention to address an issue, and then we can move on. Touch a little bit on the internalized aspect of this one for a second, just because I distinctly remember being a teenager and being in the car with this family I really, really respected and loved, and they turned around, we were ordering food or something, and they're like, I know that you have your issues, but you just like never make it anyone else's issue. Not like this other family. You're like a good disabled person who like didn't say disabled because they didn't believe I was disabled. We had an argument about that, but they like, you don't ever make your issues anyone else's problem. You just deal with them. Meanwhile, I'm 15, 16, dealing with some serious medical issues that I could have you support with. And so many times, if we let ourselves fall into this fear of attention seeking, we don't get the support that we need. We need other people. Our world, the capitalistic society that we live in now, is very individualized to the point that we have this expectation that we're able to deal with everything on our own. But if you look at our history, if you look at the way that we're built, we're meant to communicate. We're meant to build communities to support each other. We're meant to do all these things. That is the way that the human race was built. And to disregard that element, to disregard people with disabilities, to disregard yourself, strays away from the very way that you were made. It is the most natural thing in the world to seek support and find support in a community. It is unnatural to do what we have been doing in our society. So the third reason that I think a lot of people are afraid to identify as disabled, or at least to use mobility aids or other things that could benefit them, is that we have this myth of scarcity, that if I use a mobility aid, then I am taking away from someone else's experience. Or if I'm saying to say I'm disabled, then I'm disregarding someone who has it worse than me. And the thing that I think that was really important for me to learn, and it has taken me a while to get there, is most of my friends have mental illness, they are neurodivergent, they have disabilities, they are disabled in different ways, and that is different than mine. I struggled this with my sister even, who has the same disability that I have. It just has very different symptoms, and I have a lot more physical symptoms of it on the day-to-day. And to be able to recognize, like, it's not a competition, that if my sister, who's having a really, really hard time right now and needs support, if she gets support, that doesn't mean that I don't need support either. And if the system is not supporting both of us, then that means that the system is broken and it needs to be fixed. And so a lot of our conversations, because I live with my family, a lot of our conversations about home care and about helping around the house, I've really tried to encourage us, and we're working on it, is to, instead of talking about like, I can't do this and I can't do that either, is going, well, if we both need support, how can we provide it with the resources that we have? Because if we're expected to do it in this one way, like for example, my sister has all of her clothes in a like drawer set in our like living room library area, because that is what works for her. And it keeps the clothes, the need was the clothes can't be all around the house. It's a safety hazard. And it makes it easier for her to find her stuff. And so our solution was making it so that we kind of met in the middle. If the clothes were never going to make it to the bedroom in the first place, well, why can't we leave them or put them away in this space? Why does it have to be designated in this one way? And it has helped so much in my way and my communication with my family to change the way I think about things from that perspective of like, why do we have to function this way? If there is a need, clothes need to be put away, well then what is actually keeping us? Is it the inability to do the thing, or is it the inability to do the thing in the way that we've been raised and are expected to do that thing? So when we adjust to that, suddenly resources become abundantly available. And there's alternative resources, and there's support swapping. And I really think that if we have this shift, if we shift away from this, idea that our disabilities, the way that the world disables us, is just our problem, that if we can kind of say, this affects me very intimately and you won't understand it in the way that I understand it, but it is our problem, then we can address things far more effectively. Especially, like, there's no way to address ableism and sexism without addressing racism, because they are so intimately connected. There's no way of addressing any of these things without addressing the way that white supremacy has instilled in us a way that we have to do things. And all of that was to maintain certain power structures. So much of our reality is socially constructed. We've created it. We've created the story. So why do we have to participate in that way? And ultimately, I think that's what I want to come down to is, yeah, there might be a lack of resources, but that doesn't mean that the onus is on you. That means that the onus is on the community, and we need to find a way to support the community. And I hope that in my little rant of today that you kind of think about things differently. Think about it from a perspective of, well, why does it have to be this way? What can we change, like actually change, about this environment instead of just trying to make it what we think it should be? How can we explore this? Is this something that we need? Is this something that is important? Is this something that actually supports us, or is this a way that we have supported a system that doesn't serve us? And how can we engage in that? Because all of those questions are part of what makes being disabled. If you take nothing else away from this video, I really, really hope that you take away that there are problems associated with identifying as disabled or experiencing disability in our society, and so much of our society is disabling. However, that doesn't mean a problem is with you, and I think a lot of introspection is necessary, especially as people with disabilities talk to each other. We have to think about, what is our role? We are both victims and perpetrators of the way that our society tells a story. So how can we engage in that? How can we engage others in changing the way we talk about, and not just talk about, but the function that every time we participate in something, we're telling a story. How can we write the story as a community to be something that actually supports one another? So I hope this video encouraged you to think about things from a new perspective, and at least encouraged you to use the resources that you do have available, because so much of life is difficult. If you have a wheelchair and you think you might benefit, you probably would. So much of my life would have been so different if I had just let myself use the resources that I had available to me. And if I can do nothing else, I want to make sure I encourage, especially younger people, to use the resources that are afforded to them and be empowered to do that. So if you guys have any questions, if you guys just want to have a conversation or want to have a discussion about something, please leave a comment down below. If you like this type of comment, please like and subscribe. I really hope that you come on this journey. I'm working on being more vulnerable on this channel, and I know this was a lot more like up in the cloudsy, but I want to be more honest about my experience, because I want to shape the story that society is telling, and I think by talking on this channel, that is how I'm trying to change the story to help us all, and the best way is to engage with you guys. So bye, have a wonderful day, love you, mwah.